Hello, everybody. This is Cynthia Kane. Welcome to our first module and our first week of UL100ZB, Research Skills, Information, and Technology. In this video tutorial, we're going to start going over the first pillar or the first part of our information literacy skills class, which has to do with the idea of identify. Now, when you're on your Canvas course and you're looking at Module 1 for Identify and Scope, you're actually going to see two links to two YouTube videos. The first one is called How False News Can Spread, and the second one is called The Scrapping of Internet Privacy. We want you to watch both of these videos very carefully because we want you in this week to think about two ideas or two possible discussion thoughts. And the first is, why can news, true or false, spread so quickly? And how does social media affect this dissemination? This has to do with the first video, How False News Can Spread. And you just basically think about this for just a second. I am on Facebook and I'm on Twitter. I'm not on a lot of other social media platforms, but even with those two, I'm absolutely amazed by how fast something can spread that might be breaking news. Perhaps a celebrity has gotten into trouble or someone famous has passed away. Generally, I'm finding out about that particular type of information on my social media platforms before I even see anything else on a website for news, in the newspapers or anything like that. So social media really does affect the way that news, both true and false, can spread so quickly. You might also consider the fact that you might have someone on your social media platforms who is prone to posting a link to a story or maybe just a statement, and you might look at that statement and you think, I'm not really sure if that is true or not. There are different ways that we can check out the actual validity of different claims, but sometimes something will just sort of throw up a red flag. But this is how fast information can spread with the technologies that we have now. The second thing I want you to think about from the second video, the scrapping of internet privacy, is our online information really private, and does it matter? Again, I'm going to refer to social media. It's not uncommon for some of my Facebook friends to post that they took a quiz online that supposedly tells them about their personality, preferences on a pet, all sorts of different things like that. But when you click on those online quizzes through Facebook, they're actually asking you to enter a lot of pretty private information. What was your great-grandmother's maiden name? What's your favorite style of car? What's your birthday? Things like that. There is quite a bit of evidence out there that shows that that type of information can actually be hacked because those are often the same types of question prompts that we might get asked to answer if we are signing up for something such as online banking or paying a credit card online, things like that. So you have to be really, really careful about what you answer online because our online information may not be nearly as private as we think. Also, consider something that might pop up in your email. You might have a message that comes up in your email that looks very legitimate. It might be from your credit card company. It might be from the bank that you're using. And it's saying that your information has been compromised and that you need to click on a particular link immediately to reset a password. Don't do that unless you're absolutely 100% sure that it actually came from that company or bank. And even then, I wouldn't click on the link if I don't really know where it's coming from. So think about false news, think about the scrapping of internet privacy, because this is going to relate very specifically to a lot of different items that we're going to be covering in our class this semester. So what is information literacy? I hope by this point you've downloaded our textbook, the Information Literacy User's Guide, because we'd like for you to read chapters 1 and 2 of this textbook as part of the module for this week. Our textbook says that being able to find and use information well means realizing what you know, what you don't, and what you need to learn, and thinking about those categories throughout the process. That's basically what we're going to be covering for the next 8 weeks. We want you to be able to find and use information effectively for any type of project, any type of paper, but also for a personal information need and creating new knowledge. You might not realize this, but whenever you write a research paper, if you create a website, if you do another type of project, such as a PowerPoint presentation, you're actually creating new knowledge. And we just want you to be more aware of what you're doing, how it's used, and how this is going to fit in terms of lifelong learning, because we never stop learning and we never stop finding information. So in this class, we're covering 7 pillars of information literacy plus 2 additional ones. Identify and scope will be our focus for this week. We'll then start going into plan and gather, evaluate, manage, and finally present, sharing what you've learned, which you will have an opportunity to do if you choose to do the learning assessment of creating a web portfolio. There are 2 additional pillars to information literacy: visual literacy and science literacy. Now, these last 2 might sound a little bit abstract, but this is what we want you to think of. Think about photoshopping the cover of a magazine to make a person look more attractive, or a Facebook post about the newest way to lose weight. How accurate is this type of information, and how would you verify the accuracy? The first can refer to visual literacy, basically making somebody look a little bit better, or thinking about how visuals might actually influence the way that we perceive information, that we communicate our information. With the latter, that refers to science literacy. How do we know if something actually is a true claim in terms of the sciences, medicine, health, the environment, and how do we verify that accuracy? So we'll be covering that later on in this course. So pages 8 through 10 of our textbook talk about steps to research and thinking about research in a different way. This is part of what you're going to be doing for this module and also future modules in terms of learning assessments and also engagement activities. So often what we need to do first is identify a personal need for information. What do you want to know? What do you need to know more about a topic? If I have to write a research paper about the health effects of using electronic cigarettes, for example, a personal need for information might be that I'm just more interested in that. Maybe I have a family member or I have a friend who uses electronic cigarettes. A professional information need might be, overall, what are the health benefits or drawbacks in terms of society for using electronic cigarettes as opposed to smoking in other ways? Understanding the context of an information need. That can refer to scanning the information environment to find out what is already out there about the topic. So, what do I already know about electronic cigarettes? What's out there in terms of health benefits, health-related issues, health-related concerns? How am I going to find that out? And moving from information need to a research question. What do I already know about this topic? Maybe I don't know very much and I just want to know more. Or maybe I already know quite a bit. And then finally, formulating something into a research question. What are the health benefits of using electronic cigarettes? Do electronic cigarettes help an individual to quit smoking in terms of smoking cessation? So that could be a question, that can be a statement, and that can also help you identify the search terms that you're going to be putting into different resources to try to identify credible and reliable sources for information. And we'll be practicing with that over the extent of this course. So I mentioned electronic cigarettes. Are they better than regular cigarettes? That's a pretty broad topic, isn't it? What's even the definition of the word better? What would be a personal need for this information? Again, maybe I have a relative, I have a family member, or I know somebody who wants to quit smoking and is curious to know about whether or not switching to an electronic cigarette or vaping would help them more effectively. What would be the context of this information need? The context can be different perspectives. Am I interested in helping the person that I know? Do I just want to know for my own benefit? Am I just curious about it? Does this have to do more with a societal issue? So for example, here on the Emporia State University campus, we now have a tobacco-free policy. And the tobacco-free policy actually does encompass electronic cigarettes. So the context of this information need might be researching the extent of tobacco-free policies at other campuses. What ultimately could be a research question leading to a thesis statement? We've already talked about this. My research question might be, does the use of electronic cigarettes actually help in quitting smoking? Or if I were going back to a tobacco-free zone on a campus, should tobacco-free zones on college campuses include the use of electronic cigarettes? Why or why not? So you see, it doesn't really take that long to formulate a topic into a research question. How you answer that question then will drive the types of sources that you need and how you're going to utilize them. Now, you can do something called concept mapping. I like to do this on paper. There's also an online site called Bubble.us, which is also very useful. But we're going to go back to the first pillar of identify. So often what I like to do is I like to think about what my topic is. Topic, electronic cigarettes. What are the perspectives that affect my topic? So some perspectives might be health. It also could be societal. What are the societal pressures, or what is the perception of society towards smoking in general, and in particular the use of electronic cigarettes? So that's more of the societal perspective. Psychological could be another perspective. Psychologically, how difficult is it to quit smoking? How difficult is it to overcome a physical and or a psychological addiction, and can the use of electronic cigarettes help in that? The third bullet point, what sources do I need to find that will support that perspective? So going back to health, maybe I can find some websites that are pretty credible and reliable from something such as the National Institutes of Health that would talk about research dealing with electronic cigarettes. Maybe I could find medical journal articles. Maybe I could find magazine articles that talk about medical perspectives or health-related perspectives. If I'm looking more at the psychological concept of electronic cigarettes, then I might need to use something along the lines of psychology journals or even sociological journal articles, as well as newspaper articles, perhaps personal experiences. So we need to identify the sources that will help us find information to support a perspective. Finally, how will I find those sources? You're going to be learning about this quite a bit more in our class, but one way to do that is to think about what particular resources will help me find those sources. So Google could be a resource to help me find credible, reliable websites that would be sources of information. If I am looking more for psychological journal articles, then I might need to go to our library's webpage and find a psychology-related database that will actually index and locate the full text of psychological journal articles. So it's a step-by-step process, but if you take a little bit of time to identify your topic, your perspectives that affect your topic, the sources that you need to find that will support that perspective, and finally how I will find those sources, I think you're going to have a lot better luck in the long run. Thank you for watching our first video tutorial. You're now ready to move on and watch our next one called Scope. Please be sure to watch both the video tutorials before you start on our engagement activities and the learning assessment for this week's module. If you don't, you might not have the information that you need to perform them effectively. Take care, and we're ready to move on.